Here we are in step number 3 of the lace closure sewing tutorial. In this step, I will be walking you step by step through how to sew on your Mrs. Rutter's hair extensions onto your braid pattern base. The hair I will be using are Mrs. Rutter's virgin hair extensions in the length of one bundle being 22 inches, 2 bundles are 20 inches, and I will also be using a 14-inch closure that have all been dyed the color black. This hair is 100% pure virgin hair that comes in a natural shade of brown. So if you want to learn how to dye your hair extensions, go ahead over to howtoblackhair.com to watch that coloring tutorial. So to begin, I will be demonstrating in this step how to sew your extensions onto your braid pattern base, and in a later step I'll be showing you how to sew in your lace closure. As you can see, I've already progressed with sewing in my extensions for my lace closure sew-in hairstyle. I've already sewn in the complete bundle of 22 inches, 20 inches, and now I've just started stitching my last bundle, which is 20 inches. I'm demonstrating to show you that the entire process is going to be repeated across your entire head. So now at this point, I'm going to show you how you want to stitch your extensions. I'll also show you how important it is to lay your extensions a certain way near the hairline. I'll also show you the flip over method as well. As you can see, my closure is not installed, and that's the reason why. The reason why is because as you're sewing in your extensions, it's very easy to add a little bit of tension here or a little bit of tension there on different parts of your head, and if you sew your closure first, the closure will naturally look shifted than what it was in the first place on your head. So for example, if you sew your closure first and then stitch all your extensions, it's natural that your closure would look like it's shifted to the left or to the right. So what I like to do is sew almost until there's enough area left for the closure. Then I like to sew the closure, and then I like to close it off with the rest of the extensions. That's why you see this here, and I'm going to demonstrate to you how to do your stitching technique. So make sure you have a couple of needles ready and prepared so that you can continue to flow through the process. So when stitching, you want to make sure that you locate the end of your thread, and you're going to have a knot at the end. It's very simple the way you prepare needle and thread. You just take a length of thread, put it through the eye of the needle, bring both loose ends together, form a knot, and then clip the end. So now what you want to do is make sure the knot's hanging down. You want to grab your needle with your dominant hand. You want to go underneath the weft, through the net, out of the net, and then create your knot. So I've left off here. I'm going to take my needle. I'm going to go underneath the weft, through the net, and then I'm going to go back out through the net, and I'm going to pull the needle through. Make sure you locate the end of your knot on your string and do your knot technique. Knot technique involves putting the needle through the opening once, putting it back through twice, and pulling straight through to create your knot. This is a stitching technique you're going to use throughout the entire process. I'm going to demonstrate one more time. Underneath the weft, through the net, pull straight through, locate your string, you're going to put the needle through once, put it through twice, and create your knot. Now continue working up, making sure that the actual track of your bundles are very close to one another. Once we get to this point, I'm going to show you how important it is to make sure that you're laying your track on your extension as flat to your scalp as possible, right underneath your braid. So now that I've sewn my extension all the way down to where my perimeter area is, I'm going to show you up close how important it is to lay your track flat against your scalp to make sure that the track is actually against the braid and not on top of the braid. So that way, as the hair is lifted or movement is happening with your hair, your actual netting doesn't show, or your braid doesn't show, or your track itself doesn't show as well. Right now, I'm at the point where I have to begin stitching my extension here along my perimeter braid. Remember, this is the leave out here, so this is your actual perimeter braid. You want to make sure that the weft itself is laying very flat against your scalp, and that when you stitch it, it's actually stitched next to the braid and not on top of the braid. The reason why, of course, is because as the wind blows or you're having any movement with your hair, when it's lifted, you won't see any track or weft of the actual extension. You won't see your braid, and you also won't see the net. So with your very next stitch, you want to grab your needle and thread. You want to go underneath the weft, and then you want to go through the braid on your perimeter here. Pull through and do your knot technique. And then when you stitch it, make sure the track is laying against your scalp, and then tighten your knot, so that way you're reinforcing exactly what you want it to look like. Underneath your weft, then through part of your braid. Pull the needle through. Then create your knot, and make sure as you're creating it, using your finger to make sure the weft is staying on your scalp. Then you're going to do this a couple of more times before you actually do your flip over method. Now your flip over method ensures that you don't have to continue to cut your extensions to sew in a U-shaped fashion. When you're sewing in your extensions for this style, or any other sewing style for that matter, you want to make sure that you're doing it in a U-shaped fashion all the way up towards where your leave out is or where your closure will be. The flip over method stops you from cutting your extensions, so that way you won't have any issues with shedding, because every time you cut your extensions, you increase the risk of shedded hairs. So at this point, from the stitching I've done, you can see that when I lift my hair here, that you won't see any braid underneath, or you won't see the weft of the extension, or you won't see the netting. So now after I cut this string here, I'm going to add another needle and thread and show you the flip over method. So we're going to bring this track right back around and finish sewing without actually cutting the weft of the extension. So now to do your flip over method, what you want to do is simply just fold your extensions over and sew at the point where it bulges right at the fold. You want to make sure that point where it bulges right at the fold is as flat as possible so that you can have a flat install. So now what I'm going to do is make sure that I fold it over. I'm going to insert my needle underneath the weft, through the net, pull through. Then once I pull through, I'm going to create my knot. So now you want to do this a couple of times at the point where it folds to make sure it's very flat, and then you can continue stitching all the way around in a U-shaped fashion. So then once you get to the other side, you'll just keep doing the flip over method until you reach all the way up to where you want your extensions to go. So now that I've successfully folded it over, I'm going to continue stitching very close to my weft, my next area here, and just keep working my way around, flip over method, and then continue to work my way all the way back around until I'm ready for my closure. I'm only going to bring the extension all the way over to the other side, and in a later step I'll show you how to sew in your closure, as well as how I'm going to finish off sewing the rest of my extensions. So keep doing your flip over method so you're not cutting your extensions, so that you can continue to stitch all of your hair appropriately. In case you don't understand how to do your knotting technique when you are stitching your extensions onto your weaving net, I'm going to show you how. What you want to do is take your needle, and you want to go a little bit of space over away from your previous knot. Go under the weft, through the net, bring the needle out, and then do your knot technique, which I'm going to show you. So underneath this weft here, through the net. Once I go through the net, I'm going to come back out right above the weft. And then when I come out, the knotting technique requires you to wrap your string around the needle twice and then pull through to create your knot. So you go once, twice, and then pull your needle out, and there's your knot. Now I'm going to show you once again. Go underneath the weft, through the net, come out the net right above the weft. Wrap your string around once, twice, and pull the needle straight through to create your knot. This is a knotting technique that works anywhere on your head, and you're going to do this knotting technique the entire time. This is the only technique you're going to use to sew your extensions down as well as your closure. So as you can see, I've already taught you how to do your stitching technique as well as how to do the flip over method, and you want to continue doing these methods and techniques in a U-shaped fashion, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until you get all the way up to where you want it to be. You want to make sure that you're leaving enough space around the edges so that way you can finish closing off your sewing after you do your closure. Don't do your closure first because you don't want to increase the chances of the closure shifting around on your head. Make sure that you're almost done sewing in your extensions. Then you want to grab your closure, put it where you need it to be, and then you want to stitch it. So as you can see, there's probably about 1 inch or more space on both sides, and that's perfectly fine. That's exactly how you want it to be. After stitching the closure, you will then close off your sewing and make sure that you sew your extensions all the way up to the closure to finish your install. This wraps up part 3 of the lace closure sewing tutorial. In this step, I've taught you a lot of information that I want you to incorporate to make sure that your install is very flat and seamless. So make sure you're doing the knotting technique, the flip over method, as well as saving some space around your extension to install your closure to then close your sewing off with the rest of your extensions. So now in the very next step, step number 4, I will be walking you step by step through how to sew in your lace closure.